Hi, I'm Sebastian, and this is the Happiest CEO podcast. Make sure you hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. Hello and welcome to the Happiest CEO podcast. Today I'm joined by Dr. Jeffrey Burke, naturopathic practitioner, master herbalist, educator, and host of the Honest Health with Jeffrey Burke. With more than 4 decades in natural products industry, Jeffrey has dedicated his life to help people better understand health, nutrition, herbs, regenerative farming, and long-term vitality. In this conversation, we will explore a lot of different topics because Jeffrey has been around for a long time, has seen a lot, has had many conversations on his radio show that he had for 40 years before he switched to podcast. So enjoy this episode and don't forget to subscribe to the Happiest CEO. Jeffrey, thank you so much for making time to talk to me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
So cool. So cool. Look, I like to normally start with asking people like, how on earth did you get into this field 40 years ago when it was certainly not mainstream to look into sort of maybe alternative health or alternative products? It was really quite niche and also poo-pooed at part of the society. Did you have a particular moment or a driver that got you into this field?
My grandmother was an herbalist, and we were raised around her, and I learned a lot, and I definitely thought I was going to be an MD and go to medical school and be an oncologist, which is what I wanted to do. And I went to college. I went to the University of Michigan. And while I was there, I worked in a small little health food store. And I knew nothing. I was a freshman and worked part-time in there, and I got the bug. And that was it. So that goes, I mean, it's even been longer than that because that goes back to like 1976, 77. So about 50 years, almost 50 years in the industry now. So I just love it. I love being able to be on the side of technology. And as it changes, I like being able to give people the information they need. And I think that we can do a lot more personally for our good health and well-being. And today we have a lot more things to choose from.
Definitely. And, you know, my feeling is, and organic shops are, for me, certainly the place that I normally go when I come into a new town.
Many times our strict medical community does not really dispel information. They dispel prescriptions and kind of like the bare minimum of information. And we're looking for information. Obviously, with technology and the internet and all that we didn't have when I was growing up, obviously. Yeah. We had to do a lot of reading, and everything was through libraries and going to lectures and reading books. But today, I think the average person, when they are frustrated or scared or something is happening with their health and well-being, going to a health food store not only gives them the sense of positivity, but I think it also gives them the benefit of hope. And they're able to learn that there are other things that are not behind the pharmaceutical counter that give them choices. You know, many parts of the world, you know, holistic nutrition, traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurvedic, homeopathic, all those things are the first course of action. The last course of action is usually the medical community. In the United States, it's medical community first, and then natural methods if the medicine is not working. So I think that us being more interested in taking control, we have to really thank those brick and mortar stores because they're a savior for many of us.
Yeah. Do you have some countries in mind where that is really the way that you first go to Ayurveda or, you know, to homeopathics and then to like more the modern medicine?
All over Asia, India, even parts of Germany, and you get to even South America. You get to places there where they have their corner herbalists that are the mainstay of the communities. But that's usually the parts of the world where people are trying a more natural alternative or the one that makes sense first, and then the drug therapy. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not a hater of pharmaceutical. I think they have their place. And I really look at it as, you know, thank goodness I have people that are alive on this planet due to pharmaceutical drugs, you know, that saved their lives. But there's also a lot of people that went the natural route and they're doing well, you know, also. So I think it's keeping an open mind and an open heart.
Yeah. There's a saying, I think it comes from a novel, The Two Cities at the River, or I can't quite remember, but it's basically the worst time and the best time there is at the moment. We live in the best and then the worst time.
Agreed.
On which side are you with that? Because it depends on, you know, the internet is an interesting thing, and I think AI even guides that a little bit stronger. If you ask in a particular way, and say like, what's wrong with our health system, you will get everything that's wrong with our system. If you say like, what are the findings over the last 20 to 30 years that, really made a positive impact on natural health, and so you will also get a lot of positive. Like, do you have a strong view in one way or the other?
I think you first of all have to have a conversation with yourself and decide what it is that you're looking for. Are you looking for true to form answers on a situation that applies to you or within your circle? Or are you looking for just general knowledge? And I think it's true. And your point is, I think it's well stated, is that you get what you ask for many times. And, we say all the time that there's good information and bad information out there.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to decide what you respect the most. Like when I'm really looking for information, I'll go to PubMed. I'll go to places where there are published studies that have been done,
Yep.
blind studies, third-party tested studies. So I get that information, and then I have a foundation, and then I create my own opinions on top of it. But you can find someplace anywhere that will agree with you, and you could be the only one on the planet that thinks that way. But you can find someplace on the internet to agree with you, and then they go, "See, I told you," and I'm just like, "No, I'm sorry." I think it just depends on what it is you're looking for.
Yeah. So would you? I don't want to put words in your mouth, so let me have an open question there. How much of an influence has the business drive in the medical world? Like how strong is actually the making profit being part of the system, and how much of an influence has that on our decisions versus being just really safe, which I found in the pandemic, it was really obvious. People just wanted to be very, very safe. And so the decisions that were made were just like really safe decisions, but they weren't necessarily like broad, take everything into account type of decisions.
I think there's a lot of people that came out of the pandemic, to your point, that really learned how to take a look at things. I think a lot of us thought that we were doing really well and thought that we were healthier than we actually were. And a lot of people found out that we weren't, and we weren't taking care of ourselves. We weren't eating right. We weren't exercising. We weren't drinking water. We weren't sleeping well. And we found out that we were just kind of a mess and a work in progress. And I think a lot of people now take their supplements and they look at things a little differently. Did many people slide back to their bad habits? Of course, human nature. Yeah. But the thing that bothers me the most about the medical community, and I work with them, and I have a lot of friends in the community, is the amount of money it takes to get anything done. I mean, if you're going in and they want to do diagnostic and it's a CAT scan, we're talking $15,000 to $20,000. And, if you want an MRI, I mean, if you're going somewhere, it is so expensive to be healthy through the medical community. Does it have its place? Absolutely. But the biggest problem is the price, and not everybody has insurance. There are parts of the world where they do have insurance that's available to everybody. That's wonderful if that works. But the biggest problem is when we were coming up through the years, to the late 1800s into the 1900s into the early 2000s, people grew their own vegetables. They grew their own herbs because they had to do their own medicine because there wasn't a lot of available medical alternatives to them. So they were doing it because they could do their own teas, make their own tinctures and those kind of things. And you know what they did? They did well. So today, people are starting to come back to that folklore, kind of that take control of your health and well-being. And I think people are starting to embrace it more than ever before because, when the world shut down back in the pandemic time and everything fell apart, I think everybody got a little call to action and realize that they need to do something. So I think the awareness is there, and I travel all over the place constantly, and I'm seeing more and more people. Like I used to go to do a lecture and I'd have 50, 100 people there, and now I can go do a lecture and have 500 to 2,000 people there because people are coming in because they want answers and they want transparency, which is not really well established in the medical community. But it is on the herbal side. People are learning more. We're giving them all the stuff. Here's what's available. Pick something that works for you. So I think that's kind of my thought process.
No, that makes sense. And, when we talk about the cost on the medical side, is that more profit or is it more protocol that is just very labor intensive and hence very expensive? Is it just covering all the bases, or is it insurance?
I think it's all bottom line money. I hate to say that it's driven by financial gain for the large corporations, but it is. And I think there's a lot of places where, and the problem with it is a lot of doctors today, people say it's expensive to go to the doctor, but the doctors make very little because insurance comes in. The insurance pays a certain amount, and the doctors make very little. People think that they're making millions and millions. They're not. All the money's being made on the pharmaceutical side and all the medical devices, those side, and the corporate executives that oversee those foundations. It's interesting. I remember when Prilosec came out. It was a drug for acid reflux, omeprazole.
Okay.
Everybody was taking it, and it actually says on the box, take for 2 weeks only.
Yeah.
People are on it now for years. They've been on it. And it was so funny. When it first came out, it was like $600 for 30 tablets because there was a patent. And you had to get it through the pharmacy. You couldn't get it any other way. And then when the patent ran out and then it went across the counter, now it's $15 for 42 tablets because the patent is expired and now people can get it over the counter. So in my mind, I'm thinking, I guess it's not as important as they said it was. And now it's available, but it's all patent. It had to do with the patent and the financial.
And being devil's advocate, I probably would say that the pharmaceuticals would say, look, to get this to market, we had to jump through so many regulatory hoops, millions, billions for this product. Hence, we need to make a product to actually make back what we spent. And maybe there's a little bit truth in that even, right?
Oh, I think there's plenty of truth in that. And I'm sure that there are many, many hoops that they have to jump through as well. I just think that I guess I'm one of those people that want to save the world. And if I find something that does really, really well, I want to put it in the water supply so everybody gets it. So that's my philosophy. Do I understand that there's protocols and there's stones and hurdles they had to go over? Absolutely. And thank God they did, because there are medications and things available today because of their hard work. Do I still think it's financially driven? Yes. But I'm appreciative. Same side.
Something that I'm sure you have come across is like the whole psychosomatic part of disease. And I have a lot of friends that are either practitioners or also medical doctors. I always wanted to be a doctor. I just thought I wasn't clever enough. Maybe I think I would have not thrived, because you need to memorize a lot and you have to fit in a particular framework that I would have failed to right. So I respect the medical community as well. I found it fascinating, and I'm so grateful, because at times when my kids have symptoms, I can get in touch with people and they give me sort of like the, you're fine here and you don't have to do anything. So I don't have to go to the doctor. It's just a text message. And it's like, hey, once you cross this path, then you do X, Y, and Z. And so, no, I absolutely really respect them. But when I talk to especially the more alternative people, they say like, psychosomatic, or you're like, I guess, emotionally driven issues is normally where it all comes from, plus maybe chemicals. What's your take on this? Like, what influence do you think has our mindset, I suppose, and our like our mental health compared to sort of like illnesses that we have in the body?
I think that the status of mental health, especially in this country, in the United States, is terrible. I think we're dealing with a lot of people with compulsive disorders, ADD, OCD, ADHD. I think we have a major, major epidemic of anxiety and depression. I think they're huge. I think they've been hidden. I think people have been living in the shadows for a very long time. I think a lot more people are coming out, and people ask me all the time, I don't know what to do. It's my husband, my wife, my friend, and I just tell them, be present. Just be in the room. Be there so they have someone to go to. That being said, I think the internet has really driven the psychosomatic level of medicine into a crazy level, because, people will start Googling their symptoms, and before you know it, they have 47 diseases. And I mean, I get it. It can give you a little bit of information, but sometimes you've got yourself dead. You're dead and you're not even going to the doctor, and you've convinced yourself that it's terrible. I do love it. It's a double-edged sword. I mean, it can give you great information, but it can also make you think like you're dying. Yeah. And so it's crazy.
I don't give my kids often painkiller, but, at one stage, not that long ago, I gave my 7-year-old aspirin, and I didn't think much of it. I thought, oh yeah, that comes from willow bark. That's the best one, right? And then it was 2:00 in the morning, and I read the instruction, and it says like, not under 12, and symptoms could, or result could be death. And you read this and say like, oh my God, like this was an aspirin, but it had this. I'm pretty sure it was aspirin. So And then you Google that, and you're like, oh my God, there's a real chance that my child is dying now. And so, I went to the toilet. It's like, you got to vomit. You really have to vomit. And she was completely tired. She just was really not well. And so I went that. And anyway, so I totally relate to this situation where you lose your mind. And that was great, contacting someone on the other side of the world that was awake and said like, hey, how serious is it? Was I just have accidentally done? And, he gave me, yeah. So
well,
I know what you
was
mean.
talking with someone yesterday. You'll love this. They were talking about TV commercials for pharmaceutical drugs. And I remember when the very first, back to Prilosec, that was the very first pharmaceutical commercial. They had this woman running through a field of flowers, and she was picking up flowers, and she was saying, no more gas, no more bloating, no more heartburn, Prilosec. And the next day, 1 million phone calls went into doctors' offices because everybody wanted to run through that field of flowers and pick up flowers and have no more gas and bloating and heartburn. But if you watch a pharmaceutical commercial, I tell people all the time, what you have to do is close your eyes and listen to the commercial, but don't watch it. Because if you watch it, it's all happy pictures and everything is wonderful. But if you're listening to it, it's talking about all these things that can happen to you if you use the medication that you're hearing about. So I always tell my listeners, I said, when you see a pharmaceutical commercial, close your eyes and just listen. It will scare you because they're scaring you. But the thing is, the pictures are offsetting it. So you're like, how could there be anything wrong with this? These people are so happy, so they're putting the information out. They are being good about that, professional, but it's the signal. It's the brain signal and the eye signal. And in the middle of it, you're just feeling very happy about the drugs. And the thing is, people go to their doctors and they ask for the medication they saw on the commercial. We're actually shopping our own drugs.
Yeah, wow.
Crazy.
Fascinating. Yeah, very crazy. Mm-hmm. Hey, you mentioned ADHD and related. What do you call that even? I mean, like what category is that in? Is that in
behavioral?
Is it a disease? Behavior.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, and it is considered a disease and behavioral. I was diagnosed with OCD many years ago. I don't have it to the extreme degree. I do simple things like I beat my key fob 3 times on my car. I'm a tracer. So if you're seeing me, I'm like tracing the screen with my finger as I'm doing my podcast. Yeah. But that's about it. Nothing major. I've embraced it. I kind of make fun of it for myself, but I know people that have it severely bad. So a lot more of that is coming out. So yeah, it is a disease category, but it's a conditional disease.
Does that mean that you can actually remedy it quite a bit by changing your behavior?
I think you can. I don't think there's a cure for it. I think we just learn how to adjust.
Yeah. And so where is this coming from? Is this like chemically driven? We were exposed to things when we grew up or when we were even in the womb? Or is it more the way that our brain developed once our brain was developing and then we were exposed to too much impressions, too much, I don't know, fear, overwhelm of information? What's the driver for that, you think?
All of that.
All of that.
If you do any study, they're going to say it could be chemical, it could be a learned behavior, it could be a childhood trauma, it could be something that happened as an adult, it could be dietary, it could be a deficiency. There's so many different factors. I don't think they have an exact reason. They think it's different for everybody. The end result is that they end up with the situation and they either get it under control or they don't.
Yeah.
So
would you agree with my statement that the rational mind is too dominant, or is that not part of the issue? Because if it would be, I would say society has a lot to do with that.
In what way?
Well, if you're emotionally balanced and if you grow up like in an unrushed situation where information is really slow to you, like there's no screens that constantly bombard you with all sorts of different information and so on, would that, because to me, that's not a creative and right brain activity. It's more left really overall. It's all information. It's quite logical. The colors are quite defined if you want to go that way, which is sort of like the Steiner way of looking at it, especially when you're in young, early childhood and that type of thing. And does that then, it's quite quickly create a dominant left brain, really logical, and therefore that runs more of your life, which in my mind is less resilient than if you go into your right brain and actually, I guess find a broader perspective, for lack of a better word.
I think I do agree. And, I was brought up at a time where We had to create our own fun. We had to create our own
Yeah.
activities. We had to create our own color, if you will, because there was nothing. I
Yep.
remember the family would say, go outside, be back before the street light comes on. We'd be gone for 20 hours. Nobody cared. That's kind of the way it was. You
Yeah.
just did your thing. But today, I think there's so many opinions and so much stuff, everything at the speed of light. I don't know if you remember, but there was a time when the news would come on in the morning. It would come on in the early evening. And then if anything happened during the night, you wouldn't hear about it till the next morning. And now
Yep.
everything is so on top of how something is happening at that moment. I think our brains are in perpetual overload. So I think we're
Yeah.
constantly on the search for something different, something new, something redder, something riper. And I think it's just causing a perpetual frustration. So I think today it's a lot harder to be creative because I don't think you really know what you want to be creative because there's too
Yeah.
many choices. I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
it's just, I think we're in overload, perpetual overload, and reality is a hard place to find anymore.
Yes, and I think that I love the quote of where there's no vision, people will perish. And the way that I understand that is that there's no certainty anymore. There's no true north. Like I live for my country, or I live for my village, or like I'm really I'm focused on that, and I get a lot of self-worth and focus on it because the options are just endless. And I found like even like I feel I think I'm well developed and grounded in many ways, but the choices are just endless. And if you think you haven't found something that you're super passionate like yourself, you have found something and you could focus yourself on it. And if you haven't figured this out, it must be an absolute overwhelm and a disorientation because anything is possible, right?
When I went to college, all the freshmen that I knew came to college with an idea of what they wanted to do and what they wanted to study.
Yeah.
Today, if you ask the average freshman or even sophomore and maybe even to a junior, they're still trying to find it. They're still trying to find something to follow.
Yeah, yeah. And it might not be politically correct to ask anymore.
Oh, that's very true. Boy, is that true. Yes.
I guess, sort of I'm on the way on the side of like, look, children need boundaries in terms of the knowledge that they receive, the choices they can make and this type of thing. And I believe it's acknowledging that we are not as smart of a species when we are young in particular than we think we are. And that consciousness and that, if you want to call it stages of enlightenment, but like who am I actually? What am I standing for? If you move that too early, I think it completely derails the development of a person. And I think I would say, look, up to mid-20s. At least that was my experience with myself and looking at my children. I can sort of see that it helps to be actually, just a little bit more focused. And like, well, it comes to the final question of like, what is life all about? And I think it's not necessarily have like ultimate freedom and choices galore, which the US stands for, right? It's like, that you can have anything if you want, and it's the land of opportunity. But I think there's a downside as well. It's like, well, do I have to choose? No one tell me what I should do? And I think that's what I mean by sort of narrowing sort of the exposure is sometimes a good thing too.
Let me ask you a question, if you don't mind, because you're
Yes.
raising children. You're raising children in today's world.
Yes.
And raising children today is a lot different than it was raising children when you were kids or I was a kid, for sure.
Yep.
And I just wonder, is the internet and social media a negative with raising children today, or is it a positive? And how do you look at that with children? Do you limit screen time and things like that?
Yeah. So my children are brought up because they say, can I have a mobile phone? And we're like, yeah, definitely. When will it be? And, the younger ones, 7 and under, is like, with 18. And they're like, well, at least it's coming, but with 18. And our 12-year-old can use the iPad, but really focused. So is it a negative or a positive? I believe it's how you do it. And it's not a babysitter, and it's not something set and forget. So I would say we are actually only partly participating in society. We homeschool with an external teacher as well as with my wife. The kids have social activities, but also quite limited. They definitely don't use messages or something. I mean, our oldest is only 12, so it's still to come. But what we found is that controlling a little bit more of the topics that are raised by their peers is a big one. Because if you're exposed to certain thinking that is just beyond of what a young mind can think, it derails them. And funnily enough, I talked to my dad just the other day, and I talked to him about my childhood and the kindergarten that I went to, which is when you're 4 to 6 in Germany. And he was saying they were just really strong and talking about the devil and the heaven. It was in Germany, it's not unusual that you go to a church one. And he said that really didn't go well for you because you couldn't figure this out in your head. And him being actually a teacher, he said it was just way too young, for you to be exposed to that. And it's just an example of, I guess, to answer your question, these things are neutral if you know what is good for your child and what isn't. But screen time is absolutely limited. I would say, in the evening, let's say 3 times a week, we watch something like a homestead YouTube video for 45 minutes, or we have the go-to musicals that we watch every now and then, because we don't think that our kids have to constantly watch new thing. We've watched some of the musicals like 100 times in the last 5 years or something like that, because they just warm their hearts, and that's what it is about. They don't need to learn something new. That's what, in our mind, school is for.
I love it. And I thank you for being that kind of a parent. I think it's brilliant. I know it's hard. And you had mentioned something about putting somebody on a screen and then just letting it become a babysitter and everything. And I see that all over the place. The parents just sit them down with the screen and they come back 5 hours later, and I'm just like, wow.
Yeah, so, I've done it, or accidentally done it, or just consciously, like I can't cope. There were certainly times where that was the case. But the downside is that you deal with a child that hasn't moved enough, that hasn't been particularly creative. So to my point earlier, it will go to the rational mind more, or just to a really passive mind. I'm bored. And early on, and that's great, like having other parents around, right? They have maybe been there, done that because their kid's a bit older, or you somehow get exposed in the Whole Foods store to, yeah, boredom is really good for brain development. I don't say that to my child, but it's like, that's really good. Like, I'm so glad you're also bored, because people are so busy nowadays. So it's good to be bored as well. But if you want to change it, just go outside and have a look what you can do out there. And that's normally all it takes. And if you don't buy into, oh my God, I got a problem because my child is bored, but you see it actually like, this is when they ponder. This is when they maybe reject a little bit of their thoughts and dream, daydream in that. It's actually not a negative thing. And it saddens me that this knowledge is sometimes not directly coming to me. Like, sometimes I wish I would have known that earlier. I wish other people can see that point of view and maybe also adopt a little bit of more boundaries and just say, yeah, you're bored. That's fine.
I think the world is learning. I think we're all trying to try new things. And I think some of the things that we had done 30, 40, 50 years ago are starting to rear their head again, getting back to basics, making things less complicated, less confusing. And I think people are trying to embrace it, but it's an uphill battle. I know it is. So.
Do you find that consciousness overall has expanded of society when it comes to these topics in particular?
I do. And I think the consciousness and the focus comes out of, personally, I would say that it comes out of frustration or overabundant amounts of negativity or failures that have happened along the way with not enough focus. And maybe they failed because they didn't have focus. But, I heard one time before, some of the biggest things in our world that have been world changing for us, the people that invented them had hundreds of failures before they found one that actually worked. But it was the persistence and the passion that kept them going. So I think that, yeah, I do. I think it's driven, and I think we are driven. And I think if we follow our heart and follow our minds and follow our passions, we would be so much better. But sometimes we fall privy to the crowd, and we jump in with the crowd, and rather than really sticking or adhering to our own dreams and goals and passions. And that's sometimes difficult. I have literally, over the years, found myself walking in the completely opposite direction as the entire crowd. And it was very awkward. And I kept thinking to myself, no, I'm going to stick to my affirmations. And many times, not always, but many times I was right. Not always. I wish I could say that, but no, that's real. And sometimes I failed miserably. But I learned, and I'm like, okay, so that didn't work. I needed to go that way, so I will, But I mean, I stuck to it, and I tried, and fall down a few times, absolutely. But I think it's made me a better, more well-rounded person.
Yeah. And it's a journey, isn't it? Because yes, you disagree with people, and I think again, like as much as I actually quite liked the pandemic because things really slowed down and I felt okay, like I wasn't too worried about it. It certainly highlighted this for other people as well. And I don't know, it was a catalyst, as you said, like, you know, now many more people come to your lectures than used to be, because I think people also considered like, I want to see things differently. And so they start to do their research and find actually solutions that are more in line and take the fear away of this. I have to rely on the medical system, which has really particular language that normally doesn't make you feel particularly good.
No, it's true. It's true. And I think it was an awakening for a lot of people, and I mean around the world. And it's a funny story. I was actually doing a lecture in Seattle, Washington. Yep. And Seattle, Washington was like ground zero of COVID in the United States. So I'm in this restaurant and I'm doing a lecture. I came out of the lecture and they were boarding up the storefronts across the street. And we had no idea. We were in there for a couple hours. So we came out, and I was traveling with one of the brokers, and the cars were out there, and they said, we need to get you to the airport, but they didn't tell us why. They said, we went to your rooms and we packed up your rooms. We're taking to the airport. And we're looking at each other, and I'm like, what's going on? So we get to the airport. They rush us through. They get us on a plane, 2 different planes, because they were going to different places. So I'm sitting on the plane. No one is telling us anything. So I get all the way home, and I called a friend to pick me up at the airport, and I said, what is going on? And he goes, the world is shutting down. And I said, oh, be quiet. He goes, no, the world is shutting down. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And the next day, the world shut down. And it was just like, I had no idea. It was like happening around us. And then we were home, and that was when we were introduced to Zoom. I mean, I had no idea what Zoom was, you know, and Zoom was a savior to keep us connected. And after 3 months, I mean, I was literally having conversations with my animals, and I told everybody, I said, y'all got to get me on the road. I said, I need to meet people. I mean, put a mask on me, whatever, but I need to get away. The animals, I'm having full conversations with them. So I got back on the road, and I kind of liked it at that point because there was nobody out there, you know, but it was a learning time, I think, for all of us.
Yeah. And what's really beautiful that came out of that is that, you know, certainly some people just really need that connection, that face-to-face connection. I think some people are naturally more hermits, but in saying that, and I would count myself a hermit, I need that interaction. Like I remember living by myself before I was married, and, you know, I could be in my office most of the day, but I needed to go to the coffee shop and have just a 10-minute conversation of that feeling of belonging somewhere, or someone cares or knows about me. Like there's certainly that thing. And I found that the pandemic has really helped to acknowledge that. And so the community is super important, and Zoom will not do the same as actually, you know, being in person with each other. And yeah, I think it's a good thing because we moved in the digital space so much to like, we can do everything at home. It's like, well, our mental health will take a hit normally after a while.
And I have many friends that loved being at home. They still all work from home. They love it. Yep. It takes everything I have to get them to go out. And they're just, I swear to God, if we want to go out to dinner, I mean, it's just, I have to be on them for a week to get them to go to dinner. And I'm just like, and we're walking around any place we go. And of course, I'm talking to everybody, and they're just like, oh my God, must you talk to everyone? And I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what I do. And they're just like looking straight ahead, and I'm just like, oh my Lord, I need new social friends, because they've reclused and they love it. They thrive, to your point on it.
Okay.
Not me.
Yeah. What do you think AI will do for us? Because I think it's similar to what you said about social media, or what you asked about social media. I think there's certainly a pathway that it's really, really great. You know, you have like a librarian or like a PhD expert on your hands that can look into the library and get you information, being aware it is just what it is on the internet. It's not that they really have researched this as a human. But, you know, the opposite is also, you go down a rabbit hole and it will tell you whatever you want if you prompt it right?
I think that AI is going to be very beneficial for keeping people in the loop of the things that they're interested in. I think it's going to allow them to have information at their fingertips. I think it's the dictionary and the encyclopedia of this century, where we had to get the books, so the 26 volumes, you know, we had to dig through those. I think that it's going to allow people to fully understand things and maybe get the information that they may be missing, or those little pieces of information. But to your point, and it's a very good point, is that you have to go into it knowing that you're getting, it's only as good as the people that put the information in there.
Yeah.
and you should also do second opinions on your information, because not one opinion on AI, because you could ask the same question 4 different ways and get 4 different answers. So I tell people, ask it 4 different ways, get the 4 different answers, and then create an opinion on the one you think is the most true.
Yeah.
But do I think it's going to be a good thing? I do. Do I think it's going to be abused? Absolutely. I think that students are going to abuse it. I think they're going to be using it to write their papers rather than them using their own creativity. I don't have a problem with you writing a paper and doing that and then maybe going through AI to fine tune it for you. But I think that the original thought process needs to be your own. And I don't know if people are going to be able to adhere to that. But do I think it's remarkable? And do I think it's absolutely incredible for what it is and where it's going? I do. And I just think that we have to go into everything today, no matter what it is, with open eyes and open ears.
Yeah. I guess every tool, back in the 80s, people would probably say, well, nuclear power can be a weapon, but it can also really, support us in having the energy we want and the freedom that we want. It's like, okay, I can see your point too. Both ways, really. Yeah.
I'm going to say we just have to develop a rational part of our mind. That's all.
Yeah. And I think that's, coming back to such a good example as the pandemic, people just couldn't quite stay cool, but, really the fear was just really strong. I saw a couple of neighbors certainly really being really, really, really anxious. And what that highlighted to me is the spiritual development of these people might have not been as strong. There was no faith. There was no feeling of I know where I go when I'm dead and so on. Because if you go all that way, you might be okay with potential consequences. I believe actually, if I think about it, and I love the States. I'm there at least 3 to 4 times a year. Always loved it. But there is a part of society that is really scared of things. And I wonder whether that has something to do also because the spiritual framework doesn't allow them to feel comfortable with worst case scenarios.
I agree with that. I agree with that 100%. 100%. No conversation needed. I agree with it.
Yeah, actually, while I'm at the love of the US and why I love people in the US is you have so much diversity. I don't know what it is like in cities. I'm not talking so much about that. But when you go a little bit outside, you certainly have people who are preppers and people who just don't want to have technology and many things in between and people finding their own way. And I found that so bold and it's great because it's a real inspiration. People in Australia, there are only 30 million of us. So not that many, and there are not that many sort of showcase examples of this is also a way to live your life. And in America, anything goes. And when I think about preppers and homesteaders, for example, which I'm at the moment very interested because my family is, it's wonderful. People have sorted out a lifestyle for them that really connects them back to earth and to the topic of natural remedies and so on. This is all part of it, and it's coming back. And I believe it becomes more mainstream again because of people that are a bit more extreme that way as well.
When my grandmother, like I said, she was an herbalist, and I used to ask her all the time. She goes, we used to grow everything. We would save our seeds, and then we would regrow the next year. We would rotate our crops. We would have root cellars, so we would do all of our food because they didn't have freezers and all that stuff. And and they would dry everything. And I just said, why do they have so many kids? And she said, free labor. And I laughed. I thought it was hysterical until I thought about it a little bit. She said, we come from 12 children, but we needed people to work and I thought it was hysterical. But she says we were very self-sufficient. Yeah. And they had windmills that actually pumped water out of the stream. And they really, really were on top of their game. And this was a very long time ago when there wasn't a lot of technology. They had to figure it out for themselves, but they knew where they wanted to be and they didn't want to have to be dependent. So interesting.
Here's a tip for people that want to go more into that direction. So we listen to what's the English word? The Little House on the Prairie. Is that
Little House on the Prairie? Uh-huh.
Yeah. So the story is basically these are pioneers moving into the new land and having to do everything from scratch, having to build a house, having to plow the land and have animals and so on. And it really helped our children to see that as a possibility and as something that is fairly normal. They normally start mimicking that in their play, of course, which we like. And I think it changes their outlook that, this is the olden days, but they really love the idea of the olden days. And it comes down to, look, what do you want in life? Do you want to just be rich and do anything that you can to get there? Or can you create abundance in a way that is aligned with what you think your soul needs as well? Which to me, working the land or, doing something with your hands can be extremely rewarding. So anyway, that was just something that came up because, again, like that's the States and how that developed. And I think it's a great story.
I love, when I go back to the Midwest, I visit my family, and they have my brother bought the house that we were raised in. So he has a big garden every single year. And when I go back in the summer, I go sit in the middle of the garden and I just grab things and eat them right off the vine and I love it, and I love getting my hands dirty. I love being in the dirt. I mean, I have horses, I have everything now. So we get dirty, because it's your connection. People said, you travel so much. And I said, yeah, but when I come back, I can hug my horse and feel grounded all the way down to my feet. And it's just part of nature and part of that bonding with nature. And I love it. And I think Mother Nature gave us a lot of tools. We just sometimes have a tendency not to listen.
Yeah. So. Hey, I noticed this this little chain that you have around there. Is that a connection to sort of American Indians?
Nope. These are 2 crystals that I carry for 2 of the most important people in my life that passed away. And the one in the middle is for my mother. It's an abalone. She passed in January. And it's kind of my way of keeping something close to my heart so that I don't forget the importance of people in my life. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So since you are in the area of Las Vegas, is this ancient wisdom still around in the States or in the area that you are from American Indians, or is that something that got mostly lost? Because they knew partly also how to farm and and live with nature, obviously.
I think there are sectors of tribes around the country that still do the rituals and still do the things that they were brought up to do and their belief systems. I mean, their dances, their sweat lodges, all that kind of stuff. Yep. But it's very, very rare. I think a lot of people have gotten away from that. What's really interesting out here, we have Indian casinos all over the United States in different states, and they have gotten into the casino business. And they are running casinos and hotels. So they've kind of gone that direction. But do I still think there's some of it there? Some of that, wholesome part of the history? I think it's there, but it's really rare.
That's
very small.
A shame, really, isn't it? I always romanticize that. I guess that's society that has been lost, or civilization that has lost, because I do feel there was a lot of connection, of course, to nature and all sorts. You mentioned something early on. You said you get what you ask for. What do you mean by that?
I think that it comes down to our dreams and our affirmations. And I think that if we have a strong dream and a strong goal and strong affirmations, and we apply the necessity of the work that's involved, I think we get to achieve what we're trying to do. But then we have a lot of people out there that are just maybe more confused, and they don't know where they are, where they're going, what they're looking for. And they just reach out and just say, well, give me something different. Give me something. I'll just go along with this because I can't make up my own mind. And I tell people all the time, I said, be careful what you ask for. Because, when you're going to it's like having a wish. You find a magic lamp and you rub it and the genie comes out and he says, you have one wish. And a lot of people will say, well, I want money, all the money in the world, or I want to live forever. And somebody might just say, I want happiness and health. That might be their wish. And that is a great wish. If you wish just for money and you get all the money in the world, but you spend it all and get sick and die 6 weeks later, I mean, what good was the wish? Yeah. So I tell people, be careful what you wish for, because what you wish for becomes an affirmation, which can become a reality.
How do you think that works?
I think that it all has to do with motivation.
Okay, right on.
I think that I knew what I wanted to do, and once I started doing this, and once I started my radio show and everything, I knew what I wanted to do. I love being behind a microphone. I loved having conversations. You have to remember, 42 years or 45 years, 40, a little over 42 years, I never had a visual. I talked to a microphone or somebody on the phone. I never had this, this interaction that we have now. And I had none of that for over 4 decades. So was it good? Yes. Were you able to have the smiles and the interaction and the back and forth and the hand moving? And no, you didn't have that. But I know I always wanted something like that, but it wasn't even a glimmer in our eye back then. So I knew that if I stayed with it long enough, maybe I would be able to see the changes. And, in our industry, the natural products industry, when I first got started, there was very little science. There was very little choice. You only had one or two products in every category.
Really?
You didn't have a lot of variety. There were no real huge icons. You had a few books that were reputable to read. So here we are today, and we go to our yearly conventions, and it's 7 convention halls with everything with products and cosmetics and foods and all this stuff on the natural product side. It is just manifested. It was a metamorphosis that took us to this level today. So if you have a dream, I tell people all the time, you may stumble, you may fall, but it doesn't mean the dream is over. And if it's something that you really want, the motivation has to be on your side. You can't purchase motivation.
Yeah.
You either have it or you don't. And I think that the way we change the path that we're going is to be strong in our affirmations, strong in our motivation, and be very kind and passionate.
Yeah, I love it. Are you religious?
I am.
In which direction?
I was raised in Catholicism, but now I consider myself to be spiritual.
Yeah.
And in the way that I was going to say, the way I define it is I can have connection with my creator and have my spiritual conversations, but I don't need to go somewhere special to do it, if that makes sense.
How does that look? Because I think it's really inspiring when people have found a way to create that connection, and anyone can. It's a decision and probably also a diligence of doing it. But how does that look for you, if you don't mind me asking, like practically?
I know that a lot of organized religion today is not something I want to follow, because I think there's too much involved in it that I don't have a belief system in. I believe in a creator. I believe that you can communicate and have your conversations wherever you are. I mean, I could be taking a hot bath and have a communication. I could be walking in the woods. I could be riding a horse. I could be traveling. I could be just sitting by the lake and feeling the breeze on my face and have my conversations. And my conversations don't lose validity or importance depending on the place that I am. Where I think some people feel that the only place you can have communication is sitting in a pew in a church. And that's perfectly fine. If that's your place to have your connection with your creator, I think that's wonderful. And that's what you have to do. Or if you have to go to a big arena with 100,000 people and listen to an evangelist, and that's your source of your creativity with your creator, that's fine too. But for me, I think it has to do with having the communication, having the conversation, and doing it wherever I feel I need it at the time.
Yeah, wonderful.
And I believe that in my heart.
Yeah, that's very beautiful. You said that and before we actually got online, you mentioned that you had been involved in product development and natural product development for a long, long time. How does that go? Like, do you just see a need for certain things and you do your research, or how do you start off and saying, hey, this is a good idea and I will act on it?
There are many things that have been around nutritional-wise for a very, very long time. A lot of them are just natural herbs and berries and trees and leaves and roots and things that have been around forever. Many of them used all the way back to Socrates, and many of them with hundreds and hundreds of years of history and scrolls and feedback that they were used for. And as our world has changed, and as the need for more natural remedies to be able to deal with the things that we've either done to ourselves or we've done to the world and it's done it to us, I think that's where it happens. And I think that, when I first started in the industry, we didn't have something called a blend. Now, today you can walk into a health food store and say, I would like something for my eyes. They could give you something and it's got bilberry and zeaxanthin and lutein. It's got 5, 6, 7 different nutrients, all that have been proven to be utilized for better eye health. We didn't have that. When we started, if you wanted to blend, you needed to make your own. So you didn't have to find all these ingredients. Then you'd have to figure out how much to use and whether they got along well and they worked together. So I think where I have really, really liked it is if you do a lot of research, you find out that there's a lot of different avenues and a lot of different alternatives that have been used for many, many, many years. And the whole idea is to bring them all up to today's world and find the best combination of them to give people the best chance of getting a result that they're trying to achieve. And I think that's very important. So that's the part of formulating that I've always liked. On top of that, you've got all the testing, you've got the purity, you've got the checking for heavy metals, checking for bacteria, and then you've got to formulate, then you've got to dilute, and then you've got to freeze dry, and then you've got to extract. So there's so much work that goes on. I like to be on the side of helping to create all the things together, and then the chemists take over from there.
Gotcha.
So, but I think having people in the formulary world, as we have had people with great minds, I think that today, as a nation, as a world, we're much healthier for the people that have chosen to work nutritionally with their body and fill the gaps and the cracks and the crevices created by the choices that we make in living a crazy lifestyle.
Yeah. Have you got some go-to supplements that you take on a regular basis that you would say, look, in my mind, that there's big value for anyone taking them? Like for me, magnesium comes to mind because there's a depletion in the soil. It's really obvious and so on. But I wonder whether you have some in mind.
I do. I think everybody needs to take a multiple vitamin of some kind because they get an array of nutrients, many of them in smaller amounts, but sometimes it only takes a very little of something to actually make a difference. A multiple vitamin, I think that gut issues are very huge, especially in the United States. So I always recommend a probiotic and a digestive enzyme to help people break down and assimilate not only their food, but their medications and their supplements as well. On top of that, I think omega-3 fish oils, I think, are very important around the world. The people that eat a lot of fish, they don't have the cardiovascular disease. They don't have the dry skin and the dry joints. And we're drying up over here, and we're drying up like prunes because nobody eats enough good oil and they don't drink enough water. So omega-3s. And I think the popularity of vitamin D has been remarkable because when I started almost 50 years ago, vitamin D was available, but we weren't allowed to talk about it because back then they used to think vitamin D was toxic. So you would find vitamin D on the very bottom shelf. And if someone took a multiple vitamin that had vitamin D in it, you couldn't suggest any extra vitamin D. Now, today, the doctors are testing for your vitamin D and telling almost everybody that you're way low. You need a lot more vitamin D. The sunshine vitamin, for your bones, for your mood, for your clarity. So a multiple vitamin, probiotics, digestive enzyme, vitamin D, fish oils, and magnesium. Those are my top 6. And I think just those can make a dramatic difference. And then you can add things in, get into the mushroom category, get into the herbal category. But these are our foundation. You can't build a house without a foundation.
When it comes to omega-3s from fish, is there a particular brand that you would recommend, if you don't mind me asking? Because there is, of course, the contamination that you have with heavy metals in particular. And some companies test and some don't. Is there any companies you could recommend?
I've worked with a lot of them over the years, and I could probably list about 10, but the one that I have personally used for the longest time is Nordic Naturals. Yeah. And I've been using Nordic for a very, very long time because of the cleanness of the line. I just think that they do a plenty of testing, and the purity is there, and the transparency is there. So I have to be comfortable with what I use. So I pretty much, and I've done many, many shows with them over the years, and they've never deviated away from their transparency.
It's cool, isn't it? And it's so refreshing to hear that a brand, there are brands around like that, but it's certainly more common that the marketing sort of like covers certain things up rather than, look, let's be extremely transparent. Let's be really give people the information that they're asking for rather than spinning. And I'm always inspired when companies can be that strong because there's a cost to it. There's exposure that you create, but at the same time, long term, it's always the best way to go, I reckon.
Well, what's interesting is, because I was having so many different companies on my radio shows with me, many companies would come to me and I may feel comfortable with them, but I didn't feel comfortable enough to make them a focus of my show because I didn't think that their standards were where they should be. And that's not being, egotistical or obnoxious or narcissistic at all. It's just being that if I'm going to attach my name to something, I need to make sure they're doing everything they can to have clean products available for their consumers. So I've never said a negative thing about any company. That's not who I am. I just may say they're not going to do my radio show, or I've never worked with them. But there's plenty of amazing companies that I've been blessed to work with. So
yeah, it's beautiful. And again, I find the States and to a degree, Europe is also quite prolific when it comes to really high standards and people starting with being really idealistic was we don't want to divert from our quality, our standard of quality and testing and things like that. And I found that really, really inspiring and makes me really hopeful because there are definitely good products out there that do the right thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Look, what's for you next? So you finished 40 years of broadcasting on the radio without any screen. Now you're moving into the podcast world. Reading sort of between the lines, you're a bit of a mover and shaker and someone who's on the road, educating people, interacting with people. What's your vision for your next 5 to 10 years?
I think taking my podcast to where I think it should be and making it a lot more accessible and available and information and content driven so that people can come here and learn the things that they may be interested in from the guests that are the people that we want to hear from. And I think that's amazing, including professional athletes and entertainers as well, and just people in the know that we want to know their life. You know, I was talking to someone the other day, and he's a professional athlete, and he said, so what do you want to talk about on the podcast? I said, I don't want to talk about your sport. And he goes, really? I said, no, this is not ESPN. You could talk about your sport over there. He goes, so what do you want to talk about? I said, I want to talk about how you get ready and prepare and live a life to be able to do that sport. I want to know behind the scenes, behind the curtain. What do you eat? How do you eat? How do you handle being on the road? How do you manage your stress? How do you sleep? How do you take care of your body? How do you repair it when you hurt it? Those are the things I want to know. And he was like, nobody ever asked me that. And I said, good, I will.
Yeah.
So that's what I want to know. I mean, you could talk on ESPN about your sport. That's fine. I want to know how you prepare. I want to know how you prepare to do it.
Oh, and it blows my mind. When I have a couple of friends who were quite high-end sort of athletes, Olympians and that type of thing. And what I found fascinating is that they normally bring their personality to the next stage of their life. You know, like they're doing really well in business or they're really deep in their research. They're creating products. They do all sorts of things and keep that standard up. But it's also really tricky to be in the limelight, being wanted by everyone, being recognized by everyone, and then you're not anymore, and your performance is not there, and how you deal with that. And you know, it can go both ways, I believe. You know, you can also get really disheartened and lonely because you're so used to a particular life.
It happens with entertainers, I think, as well, because many of them have achieved this level of success and their visibility is so amazing. And then maybe after the Olympics or after they've retired from their team, whatever their sport is. I agree. I said there's a diminishing of focus. So your point about them continuing their success level in the next thing they do, that's what they know because they knew they had to be focused to do their sport. So they kind of take that personality and that focus and they just interject it into the next thing they do. And many of them are very successful, whether it's a clothing line, a cologne line, an advertising, a business, whatever. They're able to bring that still in. So they still find that stroking of ego, if you don't mind. But they also still get the focus that they've learned how to rely on and depend on. Because I think if they don't apply it, they can kind of disappear very quickly. Now, don't get me wrong. I know someone that want to step away. They've been in the limelight for so long. They want to, you know, kind of mellow down, and that's fine. But a lot of people really do like being out front and center. And I mean, I think it just depends on the person. So their drive can continue into their next journey.
Yeah. And I often think about that for myself more from the point of view that, you know, you can reach for the next goal, you can do certain things, or you can reflect on what's really important here. And I'm a big fan of Tom Selleck. I actually don't know why. Maybe because it's a connection to my grandma. I used to watch Magnum PI with her. And studying a little bit, you know, him and seeing sort of that, I think he made decisions based on, you know, his family a lot in terms of how big, how far away from home to work and so on. And I get that. I get that. Coming back to the very beginning of our conversation, there's so many opportunities, right? And what do you want to do? And when you have a true north and say family comes first, and yes, I want to act and I want to do things, but I don't mind if the paycheck is not quite the zeros that I need or whatever it might be. I think it's important that you just know what you actually want in life.
You know, I follow a lot of entertainers, and a lot of them, when they're starting out, they do all the music and all the entertaining that is expected of them.
Okay.
And they get their popularity, and then after that, they decide, okay, now I'm going to do the music I want to do. And now I'm going to sing the songs that I want to sing, and now I'm going to write the songs that I want to do, because I think at the beginning, the expectations are there for them to do things a certain way. But I think after they've created all that, and they already have the built-in audience, they go out and they test the water on the things that they wanted to do. And many times we find out that, you know, we like what they're doing. the new genre is just another whole way of looking at them from a different angle.
Beautiful.
But I do
Yeah.
think that sometimes we're not able to always follow our dreams because there's things that get in the way. There's
Yeah.
hurdles and obstacles, and just sometimes life gets in the way. But I'm always so happy when someone is able to achieve their dreams and they've arrived and I'm there to see them do it, or I hold out a hand to help to lift them up. To me, that's what makes my life complete. Seeing
Yeah.
the people that I know become successful.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful. Do you remember the entertainer Harry Nielsen? He was in the 70s, I think. It's funny that you say that, people do what they want to do, because I watched a documentary about him probably 15 years ago. And people who don't know Harry Nielsen, he was an amazing singer. He sang the song "I Can't Live Without You," which is something that Mariah Carey sang afterwards, and so on. He had an amazing voice, best friends with John Lennon. And he made this decision really early on to do a CD, like, an album of what's called standards. And at the time, the commentator in the documentary said it was really unusual for him to do these standards so early, which is like basically you don't follow what your fans want to hear, because it's quite out there and it's more artistic, I guess. But it always stuck with me that he decided, no, I want to do quite my own thing. I don't think it went particularly well for him, but it's something to keep in mind of, like, how much do I cater for my audience? How much do I cater for my own needs? How to find that blend? It's just a contemplation.
I appreciate that because, there's not a lot of people that trust themselves enough to follow their own heart. And
Yeah.
I wish we did more of it. I wish we were more trusting of our instincts, because I just think sometimes we don't get a chance to do that. And if you're smart enough and take a chance, you may just find how amazing you actually are following your heart.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Look, last comment on that. I'm really into human design, which is a particular way of looking at, at your personality. There are many others out there, but human design is something that works for me, just the language they use. A friend of mine has been into it for 20 years, and he said, look, basically, you look at people's, it's almost like a horoscope. It's just randomly very accurate, putting the I Ching in it and so on. And I said to him, look, it always says follow your strategy. Like, if you're a person that is more of a hermit, be sure that you have enough alone time. If you're someone who really gets inspiration by being with others, make sure that you get enough of that. And he says, I studied people over the year that were really famous or really successful. And he says, what I found is if they follow what we call my winning strategy, humans design winning strategy for that particular personality type, and there are many, he said they did really, really well in their life. And to your point, if you actually follow your bliss in a sense, it can really work well for you. And if nothing else, it gets you a lot of satisfaction because you gave it a shot, right?
When I was first starting in radio, my friends would say, why are you doing this? And I just said, he's such a new industry way back then. And they're like,
Right.
there's so many other things you could be doing, go to med school, you wanted to go. And I'm like, no, I want to work on the other side of the fence. And I blame my grandmother for that, or I thank her for that because of what she taught me. And I just kept thinking to myself, I said, no, I love this, and they're like, how can you get excited for doing the same kind of things all the time? And back then I was doing, 50 or more radio shows a month, 50 to 75 shows a month. That's a lot. And,
that is a lot.
But I loved it. And I loved it. It was never work. And I remember my grandmother, she was 90 years old before she passed. And she said, the reason you're successful is because you're doing what you're doing and you never consider what you're doing work. You consider it a passion. And she goes, that's why for you, you'll always be successful and happy, because it's not like you're going to work. You're just getting up and doing your passion. And I've never forgot that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Thanks for sharing that.
Mm-hmm.
Jeffrey, before I let you go, we have 4 questions that we ask every guest that we're really keen to hear what their take on it is. I don't know if you have been told, but I will tell you anyway, because you can do things like that on the fly. First question is, what's the best advice that you have received?
To follow my heart, and sometimes bring my head along with me, because sometimes if you're following only your thoughts, you're probably leading with something that's not passion-based. So I was told this very, 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 very long time ago, to follow my heart, but bring my brain with me.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And If you could have a coffee or whatever you drink, dead or alive, who would it be?
You mean who would I enjoy it with?
Yes.
I think it would be probably my creator, because
Yeah,
I would
right.
like to, I have a lot of questions, and I don't know how much coffee we could actually drink during that period of time. But I mean,
A
I just have
lifetime.
some basic questions. I would like to know, why and how
Yeah. Yeah.
and for what reason,
Yeah.
and the things that I don't understand, and maybe I could get some connection with that. So I was asked this before, and I think I would want to have coffee with my creator.
Yeah. That's beautiful. Very cool. Uh, what book has been had the most impact on you?
Hmm. I was raised in Catholicism, and of course, I switched over to being more spiritual along the way. But I think some of the best quotes and some of the best things that I have learned, because we did, catechism and all that stuff when we were kids, and we did all that stuff. But I think I probably learned some of the things that stuck with me more than any other book from the Bible. And I'm not overly religious. I am spiritual, but there were just readings in there that resonated with me that just made sense. And
Yeah.
what the crazy thing was, I used to think to myself, these things were written so long ago, yet they still have an application to today's world. So, and it's probably been now probably 10 or 15 years since I've read a Bible or even picked one up. But I think I did a lot of it when I was younger. And I think some of those values have come into me, maybe a better person. But I think I look at the world a little differently from the things I learned from that book that was written zillion years ago.
Yeah. Yeah. I resonate with that. How do you normally start your day? I guess it depends on where you are.
Boy, isn't that the truth? I like to get up, and I like it's because I wake up sometimes and I look around and I'm like, okay, I'm in this hotel now. Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
But I like to get up, and I like to get up and brush my teeth and take my herbs and stuff. And then I like to get moving. I like to go for a walk or get on a
Yeah.
treadmill or do
Yeah.
something. When I'm home, I have my animals around me all the time. But on the road, if they don't have a treadmill or something, I just go for a walk. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the way I like to start my day, with just some movement for flexibility to get the circulation going. And then I like to come back and I like to have something for breakfast. I have something every day. I love a smoothie. Many hotels serve breakfast. That's fine. But I would rather make myself a smoothie or something to start my day. So I'm starting my day with some nutrition, with some movement, and with some positive thoughts for the day.
Love it. Do you do journaling?
I did years ago. I don't as much today, but
Yeah.
I do a lot of social media, and I have a tendency to put all my thoughts into social media. So the world around me that follow me on so many platforms, they know what I'm thinking, they know what I'm doing, they follow my journeys. So I think that I do most of my journaling today with my social media because I bare my soul. And
Yeah.
I think most people that follow me and know me, and then sometimes I'll get on and I'll do a podcast without a guest, and I'll just say what's on my mind and I share it.
Hmm.
That's my journaling. And I think
Yeah.
that sometimes people seeing you as you're talking, I think your thoughts come across a little bit more powerful and a little bit more passionate. But I think that's what I do. I used to write down journals. I have journals in my closet from years and years ago. And sometimes I look back on them and I'm like, ooh, what was I thinking? But today it's probably more through social media. And also, I'm one of those people, I'm a storyteller. So if I'm doing a lecture, if I'm doing a big event, a lot of the things in my life I share as I'm doing these lectures, because I think it's a way of them getting to know me and feeling comfortable with me as a educator. But it also lets people know that even though they may think they're all alone in their craziness in this world, they may find out there's a whole bunch of us doing the same thing. So I want
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
to know that, just follow your heart.
Beautiful. If people want to know more about your work and want to listen to your new podcast, Honest Health, um, how do they? What's the best way to get in touch with you, follow you?
Probably the easiest way, you could follow me on any platform, but if you go to my webpage, it's just
Hmm.
drjeffreyburke.com. When you're
Hmm.
there, you can click on the Honest Health and go to all my platforms. You can click on my YouTube channel. You can also follow me on TikTok and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then I actually have my email address and my phone number right on there. I open myself up
Impressive.
for people to contact with me, and they do. Sometimes I second guess it, but you know what? It's all good, and I want to make myself available.
That's very funny. Very cool. Yeah, just for everyone, that's spelled DRJEFFREYBURKE.com. And yeah, highly recommended
Thank you.
to catch up with the content that Jeffrey puts out there. And yeah, such a veteran in the space, but still, Yeah, really up to date. I'm impressed, sort of what you bring to the table. So I feel like really you're junior for sure, and learned a lot along the way. So thank you so much for making time. It was really a privilege to interview someone who has been doing this for 40 years. And once we go off the recording, I actually will ask you for feedback of how to improve, because obviously I'm sure you have feedback. At least a little bit. But thank you so much for being here, and all the best for a new podcast. I really appreciate what you do for the community and for the world. Really, it's really inspiring.
Thank you so much. And thank you for making time for me, and for allowing me to come on and be a part of your podcast as well. I wish you well.
Thank you so much.